let's talk about another government that doesn't seem to be listening. We're going to go to line number one, and we're going to talk with one of the individuals, one of the organizers of the protest, the day of action against Bill C-51, which happened last Saturday. Jon Parsons, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm great. How are you tonight, Jonathan?
I'm very well, thank you. A little miffed about a couple things tonight, but very chuffed, in fact, to be speaking with you. I'm happy that you were able to come on, and thanks for the documents you sent my way today. I thought that 50 people was somewhat small on Saturday in terms of the turnout here for St. John's, Newfoundland. Tell me what you thought in terms of the demonstration, and then we'll go into the other issue.
Well, I mean, first of all, can I just tell your listeners a little bit about the bill?
Please, do so.
Okay, so this is Stephen Harper's Bill C-51, which is called the Anti-Terror Bill by the government themselves. And it's been sort of roundly criticized in the press and in, by former prime ministers, by legal experts, civil liberties groups, these sorts of things, as being essentially a secret police bill is the terminology that some people are using for it. It increases powers for CSIS. It does not, it means that there will be no oversight on certain CSIS operations. It increases powers for surveillance of citizens and citizen groups. And people like me and people who are involved in, grassroots organizations and these sorts of things are worried about what it means for legitimate forms of dissent, the way that it potentially targets legitimate forms of dissent. Sorry, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to say, John, I was reading this article by two U of T, actually one is the University of Ottawa and one is U of T legal professors. Their names are Kent Roach and Craig Forsisi. An excellent presentation that they gave to the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. And they agree with everything that you did say. And in fact, they cite the issue around Air India as a particular example of how the withholding of information is dangerous, and they do say that there are many parts of this anti-terrorism law that do not seem to be, well, shall we say, precise. And I'm just going to read a quote here, and then we're going to talk about this if you want. This is good. It would facilitate information sharing about illegal protesters, including Aboriginal and sovereignist groups who threaten Canada's territorial integrity. Canada should pride itself as perhaps the only country that democratically debates secession. We should not be a country that shares secret information about peaceful protesters. This is one of the things I think that C-51 is targeting, is those who, like yourself, enjoy our rights to protest.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think that those two academics have done some of the best work out there on it. And I very much appreciate that you're quoting them on it. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
My problem in general is when we are trying to address serious issues, and I think that, listen, C-51 is lengthy, and while I spent a few hours going through it, it gave me a headache, so I had to put it away for a while. I haven't finished it, and, that's the caveat. I don't know. Have you read the bill in its entirety?
Yes, I have.
Okay, good. So feel free to highlight any aspects of it that you wish in the next few minutes. But what I have issue with is those who show up at these protests and just deflate it, devalue it with idiotic references to Adolf Hitler. To me, this loses the message. And there are so many other individuals that could have been focused or highlighted that have a relevance to the elements of C-51 that we should be concerned about with respect to perhaps, wiretapping or the extended powers that CSIS might enjoy if C-51 succeeds, such as Tony Blair or Dick Cheney or George W. Bush. These are people of relevance to the issue, and just to say you're a Nazi, don't you find sometimes it takes away from what you're trying to achieve?
Right. Well, let's just set the stage a little bit for your listeners. So we had our demonstration downtown St. John's. Around 50, 70 people showed up in Harborside Park. We did a little march and had some speakers at Sir Humphrey Gilbert Building, the federal government building downtown. Two of the demonstrators came with signs depicting or comparing Stephen Harper to Adolf Hitler. And really this is where you're making, a perfectly valid point that these sorts of references delegitimize otherwise incisive and necessary protest, right?
Right.
And I take that point. Certainly I do. And, I don't subscribe to that view. And, I've never made any signs comparing Stephen Harper to, well, anyone really, I make all different sorts of protest signs and stuff like that, but it would never occur to me to compare him to someone like Hitler. And, as I say, I don't subscribe to those views for a number of reasons. One of them, for example, is that Stephen Harper certainly doesn't have the kind of power and reach that someone like a dictator from the 1930s did. And we're talking about very different contexts and very different things going on here. Stephen Harper is our head of state, but I don't really believe that he calls the shots. I don't really think he's in charge of things like someone like a Mussolini or a Stalin or a Hitler would have been, with sort of this iron grip on power. I think that we live in a democratic country, or at least the ideals of our democracy are maintained, but our prime minister and a good deal of our government, I would say, answers to their primary funders, and they represent particular interests, particular industries, these sorts of things. I wonder whose interest does Stephen Harper really represent. But all that said, I do think that it's worth us having the discussion about the fact that these comparisons are being made, and to try to understand what it is that people are trying to say with that.
Please.
So I don't think that, once again, that Stephen Harper is responsible for, the death of 6 million Jews in concentration camps. And I don't think that Stephen Harper is responsible for, the death of 55 million people in World War II, including, my family members of mine died in World War II fighting this guy. But at the same time, if the point of those comparisons that's being made by these demonstrators, and I'm just trying to think through this thing, and I've been thinking about it for a couple of days since I've been hearing these critiques, if the point is that people are concerned about a creeping totalitarianism in Canada or a creeping authoritarianism in our government, then I wonder if that's something that's worth at least talking about. Yes, it's inflammatory. Yes, presenting these kinds of comparisons throws it in people's faces. And yes, it's not necessarily all that helpful, but people are trying to say something with it,
Yes.
So I wonder what it says about our political discourse, We've got a surveillance apparatus being extended in our government. We've got talk about the suppression of dissent. We see the creation or the inculcation of fear by propping up enemies both within our country and in foreign countries who we're supposed to be afraid of. And I wonder at what point, if we see these sorts of creeping authoritarianism in our country, at what point does it become okay to start talking about these things?
I think at the initial as soon as you pick up that rock and look under it, that is when you have to start talking about it, and that is when you have to begin to exercise your voices of dissent. And you're right. Sometimes dissent gets confused for pure questioning, and I don't know what the success of the protest or the day of action has been, but I think you sent me an interesting article, and then we're going to have to wrap up. But John, I'm going to invite you to come into the studio very soon so we can continue this conversation for a prolonged period of time. Interesting, you sent me an article stating that since the protest, since the day of action, the reaction or the awareness of the issues surrounding C-51 have risen. Can you just briefly state which statistics I'm referring?
Right. Well, in the end of February, there was a poll conducted, I believe, by ECOS that showed that 82% of Canadians supported Harper's C-51 anti-terrorism bill. A new poll was conducted just last week and was released on Monday. I assume that the polling happened over the weekend and during the sort of build-up to the demonstrations, that showed that support has now plummeted to 45% of Canadians. So, there are serious discussions happening now, and people are taking a second look at this. And, I think thousands of Canadians have been standing up. and saying this is something that we need to look at seriously and have a real discussion about. And, I think it's been important for that reason. I think we really need to be honest with ourselves and have a good look at what's going on in our country, and to understand that the price of our freedoms and our rights is eternal vigilance, and the fortitude to stand up for ourselves when it becomes necessary. Just like the eternal flame that's right in front of Parliament. Jon Parsons, thanks for joining us. We're super late. We got to go to the break, but I think we need to organize a show right here in the studio which looks at the right to protest. So I'm going to contact you tomorrow, and we'll see what we can set up, okay? I'd be very happy to, Jonathan. Thank you very much for your time. My pleasure, sir. Good night. Have a great night. Bye-bye.